All right, everyone, welcome to another episode of Line Your Own Pockets. I've been clogging up a lot of these airways with my Amibroker journey already. So this one, we've got one that's going to be a little bit up Dave's, a little more up Dave's alley when we're talking about, you know, why Amibroker versus Python and all of these different things that Dave will do a much better job explaining than I ever could. So I'll pass it off over to you right away.
Yeah, so I think I might make the title of this podcast Friends Don't Let Friends Backtest with Python. So, and there's a little, there's a little bit more nuance to it. So let me just tell you what I see traders doing. And, you know, systematic traders, a lot of them are developers by trade. They've got experience developing.
Yeah.
And if you're a developer these days, it's hard to not have run into Python. You're probably very familiar with Python. You probably use it in your work. So a lot of developers are very comfortable with Python, and it's a great language. It's very good for what it does. So I see a lot of traders or a lot of developers make the jump to trading, and they want to use Python because it's what they're familiar with. They already have a lot of experience with it. They're very comfortable with it. They can probably like I grew up using a lot of Perl before Python sort of overtook the whole landscape. And I could pretty much think in Perl. Like I could write Perl code without even thinking about it. Like it was so natural that if I would have been, if you could use backtesting with Perl back then, I would have done it. But so I see a lot of traders or would be systematic traders making this default decision without much thought about it. And I think for a lot of different reasons that we'll go into, I think Python is not the best choice in most cases for backtesting. And even as you know, as difficult as it seems like your journey has been with Amibroker, like you wouldn't not even have been able to make it as far, not even close to as far as you have if you just chose Python.
See,
Like not even close.
that's fascinating to me because I instantly thought the opposite. The way I immediately thought, not just because Python, there's way more education out there on Python for me, but that also means there's way more education out there on Python for like LLMs and things like this. So I would have instantly thought that if there was like a ranking scale of difficulty, right, that it would be, probably like a trade ideas, way on the easy side of things, and then maybe, a Python after that, and then you'd put real test Amibroker kind of further down. So that's interesting, and this is from the non-coder side. So I would imagine even more so than that from the coder side, they're probably thinking, well, Python's the way to go because I already know, it's already my wheelhouse. It's kind of
Yeah.
where I play. But yeah, that's I would not have guessed that at all.
So think about it this way. Python it's like I said, it's a great language. It's very easy to learn. But the thing about Python is it's a general use language. You can use it for anything. It can handle lots of tasks. That's the beauty of Python. That's why it's so popular. But that doesn't mean it's the best tool for backtesting. Just because you can backtest with Python doesn't mean that's the best tool to backtest
Well,
with.
and just speaking of tools, right? To go back to, I'm going to be the cave guy in this, the caveman in this one, just commenting. But I'm thinking the same as like I've got one of those multi tools, right? That can do a little bit of everything, but it's worse
Yeah.
at everything than just getting. It can do a screwdriver, but it's a worse screwdriver than a screwdriver, and it can do
Yeah.
pliers, but it's worth right. So you're saying it's basically the same thing where it can do a lot of things, but it's going to be slightly shittier at all those things, which means it's a great, I always carry one of those around with me in the car. But if I have to do a job, I'm going to the toolkit kit and getting the thing that I actually need.
Yeah. And that's a great analogy. That multi-tool is it's not like you should stop carrying that thing around. You should be
Right.
using that for exactly the things that it's useful for.
Mm-hmm.
It's very convenient for doing one-off things. But so the analogy, I think it's a great analogy. This one's like probably a worse one that I was thinking about before. But so imagine, uh, you know, Excel exists,
Hmm.
but let's say that you didn't want to use Excel, you wanted to use Notepad to process all your spreadsheets and data. That wouldn't make
Could.
any sense, right?
Yeah.
You
Could, but
could.
you
I mean,
shouldn't.
you could use right. You could use Notepad for it. You could use a text
Yeah.
editor for that. You could totally do that. But turns out there's a lot of reason to use Excel. It's a lot more convenient. It's not perfect, of course, but that doesn't mean you should try to recreate Excel using Python or create your own text editor or spreadsheet to a processor to process your spreadsheets. That doesn't make sense. So,
So
but I
what?
see a lot of people essentially making that decision because they're comfortable with Notepad, for
Yeah.
example.
So what are the actual, like, into the nitty gritty? What are like the main things that, just use an AMI broker, you could place real
Yeah.
test or whatever you want with it. But what are like the main things that you're saying that this is just so much better than Python? Just right off the bat, try to talk to me with this one, but like, just right off the bat, what are the biggest differences that you're kind of seeing?
So I've worked with a lot of traders that have started using Python, and to be honest, I wanted to like Python. I wanted to be able to use it. Um, and I probably would have if I hadn't already started with Amibroker. I totally would have made this choice, and it would have totally backfired. So the reason is Amibroker just makes things so much more convenient. And it is made for trading and backtesting. That's what it does. It doesn't do anything else.
Hmm.
That's kind of the beauty of it. It doesn't try to be, we've talked about how I have such respect for Tomas, the creator of Amibroker, because he has said no so many times to features that people ask for. He's like, nope, I'm not doing that. This is what this tool's for. So because of that, it's very lean. It hasn't changed in 30 years almost. The interface shows that. That's a good thing. Um, and it just does that job very, very, very well. So I've had several traders that have made this, tried to use Python and ended up using Amibroker, and they are way, way happier for doing so. There hasn't been a single trader I've worked with for this transition that is unhappy with that choice. Their
Hmm.
back testing is literally 80% faster, 80% plus. And this is from somebody who was probably the deepest Python programmer I've worked with. He just was like had this really sweet setup of a multi-threaded backtest that would just really efficiently use all the cores in his machine. But he switched to Amibroker and he made lots of money last year as a result of doing so. So he credits that change in the work we did to transition his business from Python to Amibroker uh, for those results. So he's much happier, and a lot of the coding that you have to do is just way more convenient. And I've seen this time and time again. Like I said, yes, you can do some of this stuff in Python. It seems like it's gonna like, hey, you think, okay, there's probably a library out for this. It's just so much more convenient with Amibroker.
So, just to talk to that Python programmer, and I'm not, again, as someone who doesn't code, how much different is it? Like, how big of a step is it? Because for me, it's going from I know absolutely nothing to I'm trying to learn, that this particular language in Amnibroker. But that cross, as opposed to, working your way up, to move across like that, is it as big of a deal? It's going to be, is it the language or the syntax even remotely close? Like, how big of a journey is it from one to the other, as opposed to me starting kind of from the ground up?
You're not going to snap your fingers and be there. There's going to be some learning curve, of course.
Hmm.
That's true for any tool. Um, but this it's just so much easier once you get there. He's creating strategies now way faster than he was before. When we started working together, he had basically one strategy, maybe two strategies. Now he's got five or six that he's trading live with. So
Okay.
his business is just so much more robust. His his drawdowns are a lot shallower. He just feels better about his trading and how robust his trading is now. And that's largely because of the pace at which he can come up with strategies now is just it's like night and day.
And so internally, what's happening? Is it just that the processing of trades is better with a dedicated? Is it, like, again, speaking completely layman, you point at, I'm thinking about cars. I'm looking at my little ring camera and I got my cars on it, right? So you look at it and you're like, those two cars are the same thing. Like, but there's definitely something that's under the hood that is going to be different from one to the other. Is it the way it utilizes computer resources, or is it just more of the way it's processing each individual trade in the back end?
Yeah, I think it's both. So the database backend that Amibroker uses is just extremely efficient and made for bar data. So uh, there's just you can tell this is created by a really hardcore software developer that knows hardware and knows Windows in and out. So it is literally like the most efficient way to store and access the data when you're doing a back test. And that's what you end up doing is just you're going to be churning through bars and millions of bars of data when you do a back test.
Hmm.
And to be able to do that efficiently is super important. Even, you know, even minor inefficiencies there get magnified over and over and over again when you're doing it across enough data. So the efficiency of the backtest and accessing that data is like second to none. And then
So is it
accessing the data, like for example, accessing higher time frames and accessing bars, like using 1 minute bars for your periodicity for your back test, but
hmm
then accessing like the 10-minute bars to see what's create variables on a different time period. That's very easy and efficient to do in Amibroker.
Well, and that was
But
actually, even coming from real test, I was very impressed with that ability in Amibroker. So, with real test, obviously it uses daily bars, but you can go weekly and monthly. And for some of
mhm.
my strategies, I do that where I'm looking at weekly for longer periods of time, and then, doing some testing in the daily time frame. And it was more complicated and a little bit harder to do in real tests than it was in Amibroker. So that was the first thing that like really makes sense to my dumbass, because it makes perfect sense that this it's the ability. It's basically you have to build two data sets at that point. You've got your intraday, maybe your 1 minute bars, then you're building another to pull in enough information for that. And I was just thinking of how to program that would probably be incredibly difficult in something like Python or some sort of free form programming language.
Yeah, and it's not that you can't do it, but you can trust that it's done in Amibroker in probably the most efficient way. And if it's
Hmm.
not the most efficient way, Tomas is going to find and tweak in a future build to have it be the most efficient way. You can trust that. So yeah, and that's just one thing that you have to do when you're coding to do a back test. There's a slew of all sorts of things that are just kind of handled by default that if you chose to do it with Python, you would have to go down this whole rabbit hole of a custom solution that to do this one little thing that it seems like, oh well, yeah, that's not bad. I could just have ChatGPT that to do this, or but you just avoid so many rabbit holes that are going to
Hmm.
take way more time than you think they will by using a standardized solution, essentially like Amibroker.
Well, and that's what, as you were describing it, that's kind of the thought I had in my head of starting like a small project around your home. And you're like, oh, I can pull the cabinets off and put new ones back on. Then you open it up
Yeah.
and there's like, plumbing there. And you're like, well, in theory, I could learn, how to redirect this plumbing and then eventually this whole cabinet job that if you just paid some guy a couple bucks to come and do ends up being this just huge task that has taken up a ton of your time. And that was kind of my experience too when we talked about my thing with Amibroker going from Polygon data versus IQ. It was like, yeah, I was saving a few bucks, but on top of that, the amount of time and energy I was doing, and I was seeing that I was going to fall down this rabbit hole of, okay, now I got to bolt on real time data, and now I've got to bolt on. So, do you
Hmm.
think that's the main reason that people don't do an Ami broker or something like that? Is it cost at all? Because Ami broker is really not very much, or is it just the
Yeah.
comfort of my home
I,
base?
I think it's a combination of two things. One is the home base. Hey, I'm familiar with Python. I know that really well. I'm going to use
Hmm.
that, obviously. The other thing is the um, lost my thought here.
Is it Mac PC? That's the other thing you were going to talk about? I remember because Ami broker. That's part of my problem is I've got this massive MacBook, and Dave's getting me this close to just selling it and
Yeah,
buying a PC because with Real Test it was okay, but Real Test is a little bit lighter, heavier on the RAM, but just a little bit lighter overall as a platform. And I could see a lot of people doing that as maybe they're coding in Linux or they're coding in right Mac OS or whatever it is, and they're able to do that fine. You're saying, okay, well now you have to not just because right off the bat you say, oh, I'll just do a virtual machine. I'll spin up a virtual machine on my Linux
hmm,
computer, and then I'm good to go. But then you realize how resource intensive it is, and you're like, okay, well, dual booting or running a virtual machine inside is just not practical anymore.
yeah,
Because now you're using so much resources, you need a dedicated work unit just to do that one thing. So I could see that being another thing, trying to drag people off their chosen
hmm,
operating system that they've sunk. Not just it's not just like identity or something. It's a crap ton of money I spent on this laptop that I now need to
yeah,
sell and buy something else with.
yeah. So the second thing is, so I want to come back to that point because I see a lot of people making that decision too. So I think people get scared because Amibroker has its own language. You're not going to be able to use that language for anything else. You're only going to be
Mm,
able to use that for Amibroker. So you're like, gosh, well, why do I really need to learn a new language just to do a back test? So that's the thought process. And that's very reasonable for that to cross your mind. Um, but I mean, I've worked with several traders who have never programmed in their life, and they're using Amibroker really well now. Like you're one of them,
mhm.
Michael.
Well, and that's
Uh,
what for me this conversation, like you're kind of using it as people coming over from Python to Amibroker, but for me it was I'm sitting here at this fork in the road, right? And I don't know anything. So do I learn this one thing that's good at this one thing, or do I learn Python that's good at everything? So that's what was pulling me over to Python is exactly what you're saying, the time commitment of learning. Do I spend 100 hours learning Python and I could do this, that, and the other thing? Or do I spend, that same amount of time really diving in? And you're right, I only kind of gain knowledge in that one code, and I don't really gain too much knowledge that I could use outside of it, right?
yeah. I think another reason people glom onto Python is uh, ChatGPT and other LLMs are just so confidently spitting out Python. They believe, okay, this is going to be an easier path, and to uh, okay, ChatGPT, create some Python code for me to do a back test. It's going to very confidently give you some code that
Hmm.
seems like it's going to work, but then when you dive in, it's like, okay, well, there's a lot more involved here than I thought there was going to be. So I think that's another reason. Um, so you mentioned the Mac and the PC. It does remind me of that sort of debate where it's almost a religion for some people like us. Some people and I used to be in this boat. Like there was a time where I was really into Linux. I tried to get it running on my laptop with, you know, uh, a GUI interface,
Hmm.
desktop interface with Linux, and it's you can do that. It's possible to do that, but that doesn't mean it's the right choice. You're going to spend a lot of time uh, working on becoming an OS expert when that's not really what you want to do.
Yeah.
And I felt like it was cool. It was fun to do, but gosh, the whole reason. I mean, you don't want to become like a lot of times. I like one good example is I am a cyclist. A lot of my cycling friends do their own work on their bikes. They do they're basically become mechanics. That is something I do not want to be good at. I do not want to be good at bike mechanics. That is not what I'm here for. I don't want to be good at that. That's only going to be a time suck for me. And it's a little bit dangerous because I know I'd probably enjoy it.
Hmm.
So I just know that it's a rabbit hole that I want to avoid. What I'm trying to do is be the best, absolute best trader I can be and the best coach I can be. So that's what I want to focus on. And anything that pulls me from that is not good, even though it would be totally fun. So that's kind of the way I think about it. And I think a lot of developers find themselves in the same boat or have some of the same tendencies that draw them into situations like this.
Well, and not to say that there's anything necessarily wrong with that, but you just need to understand that what you're doing is trying to become a hobbyist in one thing, and you're spreading yourself out, and that was really the crux of why I ended up going first with real tests and now with Amibroker as opposed to learning Python was simply that was well, what am I trying to do here, right? I'm never
Yeah.
going to sit down and like code a calendar app for something, right? I want to
Right.
really focus, and then I'm going to. That's what's kind of pushing me to the PC realm. It's like I still hate Windows. I still dislike. I dislike that when I bring up the start menu or whatever, and I start typing in my program, it wants to send me to like their store. It's like there's a whole bunch I hate about it, but I just look at it the same as we were talking about with Amibroker, is that it's ugly and it's boring and there's nothing flashy about it, but that's okay. That should just be your dedicated, this PC does nothing but this particular work or part of my life or whatever. And then so that's going to be my plan, and then I'm going to buy a little MacBook Air, and that will be for my email and
Yeah.
doing all the other things that it can do. So that's how I would look at it for these people as well, is do your Linux stuff if you want to do your
Hmm.
Linux stuff, right? And maybe I know there's like all these privacy concerns and everyone, Microsoft shoving AI down your throat every time they get a chance, and that's fine. So just make it right. That computer, that PC does nothing but back tests and runs and does whatever. It's probably better that way anyway, that you're not gumming it up with your personal stuff. And then when it comes to, emails or video games or whatever you'd other do for your computing, you've got a separate device that, goes over there. And that's kind of the way I'm looking at it as well, because I wasn't really religious about it. I just hate Windows and I've just been using Mac
Yeah.
OS for so long. But that's kind of the way I look at it, is okay, dedicated PC that even you could remote into, sits in another room or whatever, and it just does that one thing. And then you have your other computer for your other stuff. And that's I think the easiest way around that for a lot of people who are kind of stuck in there.
Yeah. I think that's true. So I did recently talk to uh, a trader that's been trading for, I think, since 2017 or 18. I won't mention his name, but he's done really well. And he recently paid a lot of money to somebody to create a Python backtesting system for him. And actually, as far as backtesting systems go, it wasn't too bad. But he has so much money sunk into the system and he can't really change it that much. Like he doesn't really have, it's almost like a black box at this point.
Hmm.
So he has to have this developer to work on it. He was trying to get me to help him with this, but I was like, gosh, that sounds like a rabbit hole. Like it's you need to be working with something more standardized, and
Yeah.
you need to be able to modify what you're doing. And it was just clear to me that he was kind of he had already sunk a lot into it, so he's sort of unwilling to change or because of that. And man, he's in a sticky situation because of that. So he's sort of stuck with this suboptimal situation that, man, I wish, if he'd had approached me several months ago before he did that, he'd be in a much better situation now.
Yeah, well, and it almost seems like you'd be better off buying the program and then almost buying a person to code into it if you were, kind of really unwilling to do that yourself, right? Or and I'm interested to hear, and this is kind of on topic, but why you think LMs are so crap at Amibroker? Because like this whole conversation, the real test versus Amibroker, like all of these conversations in my mind just dissolve entirely if you can ever get LMs to be really, really good at not only building like an initial script, but like all the other stuff when it comes to Amibroker. Because like for that person, for example, who spent all that money on building a Python code, well, that they just buy Amibroker, and if they could just type into an LLM what they want and be able to go from there, that whole thing in my mind just dissolves. And I'm approaching this from my point of view as well. That whether or not I use platform A or platform B doesn't matter anymore, right? I'll use real
Mhm.
test for some things and Amibroker for others. If I could have a centralized LM that does it, and so I have an LM that's amazing at real test. It like I'd say 80% of the time it does exactly what I want to do and it does it perfectly. Like why is it so hard on Amibroker's side? What's so different?
I think so. The language is set up for speed, and because it's set up for speed, it's operating on arrays, and that is what confuses the LLMs and a lot of users who start using it for the first time and are accustomed to another environment. So by default, you're operating on arrays and
Mm-hmm.
instead of scalars, and that may not make a ton of sense to you, or non-developers, but um, it's just think of it like operating on entire columns of a spreadsheet versus just a cell at a time. It's
Okay.
just it could be so much faster to do that, um, and because of that, the syntax is by default operating on the entire column versus the cell, which people are used to. Uh, when they program stuff, they're used to thinking about it in terms of scalars, just like the cells or the stuff in the cells. So it's because of that I think that there's this layer there that they don't understand. Or you, let me back up. They can be made to understand, but by default they don't quite get that. So um, I've created a really good AFL generator in
Mm.
MapeKit. It works really well, and it's because behind the scenes I've given it, okay, here's how you exactly do that in AFL. So it has so much context about how to create the right kind of back test with the custom columns in there, and the things to avoid that, uh, you know.
Right.
So it's just way more efficient when you give it a lot of context, and then uh, if you ask it to do something without that, it's not going to be very good at that. And as it's very clear and pretty obvious, LLMs have never made a trade before.
Mm-hmm.
They've never had to feed their family by making trades and profiting from them. So the incentive's just not there.
Yeah, and I find that, and I don't know, this is just me using them more and more, but I find more and more I have to like remind it not to be lazy. Like I'm like, check these news articles, like, and it comes back with like half of what I asked for. I'm like, no,
Yeah.
go. go do. So I don't know if it's just like it's learning from humans and it's just getting lazier over time or what it is, but yeah, because that always interests me. Because for me, talk about this all the time. These LLMs were what I needed to get into this thing that I was always interested in, but because I had absolutely no programming background and full time jobs and all of that, was so much harder for me. And it was one of the reasons that I went because I tried Amibroker first, and it was just far beyond anything that I could do. So then I went to real tests, and I found that I could muddle along, and I could muddle along with the help of these LLMs. And then I I'm waiting kind of for the same thing, which I do have some feedback. You can remind me for when we go offline of your thing. That as
Right.
soon as that is there, then yeah, it's 100% of we are going to be, I think, more tool agnostic, which I think is kind of the crux of all of this, right? You shouldn't be using Python because you know how to use Python. You should be agnostic to what it is that you're putting your idea into, because at the end of the day, that's the goal. Is you have an idea about trading, you've seen something in the market that you think may have some validity to it. The tool that you should use to get the data out, whether or not that's a good idea or not, it shouldn't matter. You should just pick whichever is the best one to do it. And kind of what we're saying is that, a purpose built tool is always going to be better than a generalized tool if you're trying to do a purpose built activity. So I think as soon as we get
Yeah.
that bridge down where that Python developer could say, just type this is the thing that I want, blah blah, and then get that code out and inspect it and do all the right to make sure we're not being slaves to the AI things that we need. I think that additional leap will be so big that it, again, hopefully it will help with this problem entirely.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that's a great way to put it there. I mean, another way to think about it is you shouldn't care about the tool you're using. Like that should be completely irrelevant almost. Like your main goal is making money. That's
Hmm.
the main goal for trading, like figuring out strategies. And to make money, you need to come up with a strategy. To come up with a strategy, like the whole goal and the way you're going to be more robust as a trader, the way you're going to be in this game for longer is to come up with strategies faster. And
Yeah.
if there's I don't care how much you like Python or even Amibroker, if there's a tool that came out tomorrow that allowed you to create strategies faster, you should use it. Like
Hmm.
the goal is not to make a lot of money using a particular tool. Like that should be irrelevant. Like the whole point is making money.
Yeah, and it's funny because I'm building these crypto strategies, and I'm writing emails about them. They're part of my email list. And one goes, "Oh, how are you trading such crap?" Because it was like it actually one of the recommendations was Fartcoin, and it ended up making like a 52% return in Fartcoin. It's like, how are you trading such crap? And then that was exactly my response. I'm like, the bank will take the money regardless of whether or not I
Mhm.
made the money in a blue chip company via dividend or whether I bought something called Fartcoin and sold it a little bit longer, and I can turn that money into food that my children can eat, regardless of where that came from. So yeah, so getting yourself out of the, oh, I'm good at this, therefore I'm gonna kind of
Yeah.
spoon, shovel that in, and just I don't care. These are all just numbers on the screen. I'm just trying to make the numbers work for me as opposed to work for someone else out there.
Yeah. I see. So it reminds me, I see some traders get stuck in making their strategy statistically perfect. Like, they're trying to eliminate every single bit of curve fitting or worrying about curve fitting too much.
Hmm.
And what I tell them is, when you go to deposit all your money from you that you've made with your profits, there's not a checkbox that says, "Hey, I didn't use any curve fitting with the strategy that made all this money."
No,
Right? So,
it it is crazy how much us as humans try to get in the way of that. And we know people who may have been good traders and then fell into like political traps, and they, I won't buy this stock because my team doesn't like it, and I won't, and just
yeah.
all of these biases that pull us in different directions. Where, yeah, at the end of the day, the goal is to put money into the market and to have more money come out than you put in, and whatever you use to do that, good for you, as long as it's
Yeah.
legal, right? Have at it.
Yeah, I mean, another thing I like to say is, do you wanna be statistically perfect or do you wanna make money? I think
No, and
that's
I think
sometimes that's the choice for some people.
yeah, and I think that's a perfect way to put it. So, yeah, so I another good one. I didn't think I'd have as much to add as I did, but I guess I can find a reason to waffle on about anything. But and I appreciate it too because it was still getting to the point with me a little bit where this Amibroker journey has been difficult. So, there's some times where I'm a consumer of content. So I watch a YouTube video and I see a guy do a back test with Python. I'm like, that's interesting. So it's kind of good to keep me in this box I've chosen to live in and, until I figure it out.
Yeah, I think I'm always eager to get the updates from you and see where you are with Amibroker, and yeah, I can tell you're progressing really well.
Well, maybe another one soon. But
Yeah,
until next time, I'm Michael Noss.
and I'm Dave May. Talk to you next week on Line Your Own Pockets.